Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining. Sunil here. Can you hear me? Please confirm in the chat box. Thank you. Thank you very much. Let's stop the chat. Okay. Okay. In this session, we are moving on to next tool called as Nagios. We are moving on to next tool called as Nagios. In this session, we'll understand what is Nagios. And we'll also experience how can we install Nagios. If required, we should be in a position to install Nagios. Not just installing Nagios, we'll also learn how can we add missions to Nagios servers. So this is our topics for the today's session. First point, what is Nagios? If anybody asks you what is Nagios, your answer should be Nagios is a monitoring tool. You're right, Nagios is a monitoring tool. The moment you hear a word called monitoring tool, immediately you will get you will compare with the CloudWatch, isn't it? CloudWatch is also a monitoring tool using which we can see the metrics of EC2 machines, how much is the memory utilization, how much is the CPU utilization. We have experienced the CloudWatch monitoring tool. That's a pure monitoring tool provided by AWS for managing their AWS infrastructure. When assuming the client is not on AWS, not on cloud, every cloud platform will have its own monitoring service. Fine. If a client is not on AWS, if a client is having their on-premises infrastructure, how can they monitor their infrastructure? Obviously, using a tool called as Nagios. So Nagios is generally used for monitoring the infrastructure which is not in cloud, in case if they have non-premises infrastructure, but they want to monitor whether it is on-premises or cloud. So monitoring, in that case, Nagios comes into handy. Right now, Nagios is not much used because right now most of the clients are obviously DevOps clients are definitely in cloud. Generally, if a client is not in cloud, they do not implement the DevOps methodologies. Clients generally on cloud implements DevOps methodology. So in case if anybody asks about monitoring service which are not as part of cloud, then obviously we have to have an answer for it. The answer is Nagios. We will experience how can we install Nagios, and using Nagios you can monitor a number of machines. How can we add machines to the Nagios server? We can using that we can monitor. So this is our plan for our today's session. Okay, let's move on. Nagios is a monitoring tool, as we have just discussed. Use it to know the metrics like CPU utilization, RAM utilization, network packets, network bandwidths, disk read operations, disk write operations. A lot of metrics we can also monitor it using the tool called as Nagios. Let's experience how can we use Nagios for monitoring the missions. Okay, so let's create two missions. We'll create one mission. We'll create two AWS missions. In one mission, we'll install Nagios. That's called as a Nagios server. And using that Nagios server, we can monitor a number of missions. So for second mission to monitor, we'll be creating two missions. Okay, so let's proceed and create two AWS instances. Launch instances. I go with Ubuntu machines, 18 version. T2 micro, obviously, number of instances 2. Security group, I will be adding custom TCP. HTTP. Custom ICMP. Okay. So make sure that you open these ports. Review and launch. Review and launch. Click on launch. Create a new key pair. Any name, I'm writing it as Nagios key pair with today's date 20. In my desktop, I have created a folder called ppk, and I download the PEM file. Instances are now launching. Scroll down, look at the instances. We have created 2 instances. Fine. One machine, I will be installing Nagios. Okay, let's wait for the machine to get started. In the first machine, I will install Nagios. So I name it as Nagios server. Can you hear me, Babat?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you
How are
hear
you
me?
doing? How are you doing? Yeah, I can hear you.
I'm doing great. How are you?
Thank you. I'm doing good. Thank you. That's it. So Babat, I have created 2 instances. In one instance, I'll be installing this monitoring tool Nagios. Okay. So this machine, I will be installing Nagios. That's the reason I've named it as Nagios server. Let's connect to this particular machine. Okay. I connect it using git bash. Connected. How can we install Nagios? First, update the repository. Done. apt-get install Nagios 3. We are installing Nagios version 3. Just click on tab. Okay, click on tab. Just click on OK. Just click on tab. Okay, it will ask for the administration password. Nagios web administration password. You need to remember that. I want to provide password as my name Sunil. So this is very important. Remember the password at which you're providing at the time of installation. Confirm the password. Let's wait for the Nagios to get installed. Done. Okay. If you want to check whether the Nagios is successfully installed or not, take the public DNS. Okay. Take the public DNS of your machine in which you have installed. We have installed Nagios in this particular machine. Click on get the public DNS. This is the public DNS. And the URL ends with /Nagios3. It is asking for the details. Anuj, you remember the password which you have given at the time of
Sunil.
installation? That is Sunil, right?
Sunil,
The
right.
default username is Nagios admin.
Okay.
The password you need to provide which you have used at the time of
Sunil.
installation.
Sunil.
The moment you sign in, this is how the Nagios dashboard looks like. So it's pretty easy. Installing Nagios is not at all a difficult task. It's a pretty easy task. Okay,
Easy
you can
task.
see the instance. You can see how exactly the Nagios dashboard looks like.
Correct.
Under services, currently you will find localhost. Go to services.
Localhost.
Localhost is nothing but the machine in which Nagios is installed. See, it didn't monitor the current users who are connected to the machine, disk space. Okay, total number of processes, nothing but the CPU utilization. So everything you can get the standard metrics. Got it?
Right.
So of this particular current machine in which you have installed. Okay, so the point of Nagios is not only in this machine, it should monitor the rest of all the servers. Like client is having
Correct.
some 100 missions.
Right.
Client may have 1, 2, 3, 4 n number of missions. What we have done, we have now exclusively created one mission. We have named it as Nagios server.
Nagios.
Okay? Now, this is the purpose of the Nagios server is to monitor the rest of all the missions, isn't it? How
Correct.
can we monitor other missions? For that purpose only, we have created altogether a new EC2 mission, isn't it?
Correct.
We have this mission. So we'll now understand how can we monitor this particular server one, or can be a number of servers using the Nagios server.
Okay.
To add the remote servers to the Nagios, if you want to add a number of missions to the Nagios server, you need to do some configurations. You need to do some configurations. There is a file called as nagios.cfg. CFG stands for configuration file, which is available in the Nagios 3 directory. Check_external commands by default value will be 0. You should change it to 1. This is the first configuration you have to do it. Okay.
On the client machine?
Not on the client machine, on the machine in which we have installed Nagios.
Nagios. Okay.
So this machine we have installed Nagios. So I go to that particular location. And then scroll down. Can you see check_external_ commands, Anuj? We have this. The default value will be 0. You need to change to 1.
1. Okay. Perfect. So we have switch on this parameter.
By default, when the external commands is 0, it will not monitor the rest of all the servers. When you change it to 1, you are informing that you have to start monitoring it. So whenever you install Nagios, a group gets created. The name of the group is Nagios. So you need to, all the groups will be available under etc groups, isn't it?
Right.
So you can see the group got created. That is the last one.
Nagios.
You need to just append www.data. Okay. You have to do this. Next.
What is the purpose of this?
Even I'm not sure what is the importance of this. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
So, and then you need to give some permissions to the read-write directory of these two directories.
Yeah. Internal configuration in the Nagios server.
Yeah. All this we are doing it in the Nagios server only. Whenever you install Nagios, by default, Apache 2 will also be installed. Okay. You need to restart Apache 2.
Right.
You need to restart Nagios 3. That's it. These are the configurations you need to do it. It's a one-time action.
Done.
That's it. Okay. So first what we have done, we have installed Nagios. It's pretty easy activity. And then we have done some configurations, one-time configurations. on the Nagios server. We have also done that. Next thing, what we have to do, we have to add the mission to the Nagios. Okay.
Right.
Anuj, how many missions you are planning to add?
We right now we have only one.
One mission. Okay. You want to add one mission as of now.
But I would like to ask, is there any limitation?
No limitation.
Okay.
Nagios supports a number of missions. There's no limitation.
Perfect.
Now, as of now, we are learning how can we add one mission to the Nagios server. All the configuration files of Nagios will be available in Nagios 3 under config.d directory. I want to go to this particular directory. I want to go to this particular directory. In this directory, you have a lot of configuration files, CFG. You can see a lot of configuration files.
Right, right.
So in this location, I will be creating a new configuration file. Okay. I'll be creating a new configuration file. Look at this, Anuj. What is the name of the configuration file I'm writing?
Server1.cfg.
It need not be always server1.cfg. It can be your name also, anuj.cfg. It can be my name.
Perfect.
Configuration file name can be anything.
Right.
This configuration file should contain the information about the IP address in which machine, which EC2 machine you are planning to monitor.
Perfect. Just like etc host file.
Exactly. So in the Google, I have searched for how can we add the remote servers. So I got this very good information from the Urban Penguin website. Defining a new host is nothing but adding the new machine to the Nagios servers. Okay. So I picked up this this particular syntax. Okay, you have to mention this particular syntax in which file, the configuration file which we have newly created. Okay,
but for each host we have same
to do
syntax
it
repeated.
Yes, you are right. Okay.
Oh, it's not a single entry just like in etc host file.
No. Every server we should have one configuration file.
Oh.
If you want to monitor 10 servers, okay, you have to create 10 files.
10.cfg and
.cfg files. Yes, you are right. So this is the syntax. In this syntax, what you have to do is you have to change only 3 values. You have to change the host name. You have to provide the alias name. You have to mention the IP address. Okay.
Right.
Host name will be the DNS name of the machine which you're planning to monitor.
Right.
This server one I want to monitor.
And this is public DNS, na?
Yes, you're right.
Correct. Okay, the which we put while logging to the external.
Yeah.
Got it. So now Nagios is a licensed version.
Open source.
Oh, cool.
The beauty of DevOps is all open source, and the server one is the alias name. Okay, is nothing but so that you can refer which machine you're monitoring, and IP address is nothing but which machine you're planning to monitor.
It may be host name as well.
Private IP address. It can be host name also. So better to be private IP. That's it. This is a default syntax, maximum check attempts. In case if the Nagios server is unable to attempt the remote servers to monitor, it will attempt 3 times. Okay, and then stop attempting. Okay, check period. I want my machines to be monitored 24/7. And there is a command which helps you to monitor. The name of the command is check -host -align. It should have root access, notification interval. If any mission is down, we should receive notifications in return. Okay, right. So every 60 seconds it will send us the notifications. Notification period is again every 24/7. I want to receive notification. So like this is the syntax. Correct. Okay, now what you have to do, so now I have defined host is ready with me. So what I'll do, I will create a new configuration file.
Right.
Go to insert mode. Escape code and double click to save and quit. Okay, and restart the Nagios. As we have restarted Nagios, now go to Nagios homepage. You can see this space is critical. Why, Anuj?
Right.
Because
my
EC2
client,
machines comes with only 8 GB storage, right? 8 GB is very
Right.
less.
right.
So it is already identified that the disk space is
But
critical.
Sunil, why we did not have this kind of alert when Nagios server was startup? Because it also monitors
This is
itself, right?
Nagios servers only. This is not the new machine which you added. This
Okay.
is local host.
Hmm.
It will take some time to give you the report. Immediately, it will not give you the report. Okay.
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 Initially, these were not
this is not
highlighted.
the new machine which you have highlighted. So you can see
Got it.
3500 MB is
Got
free.
it.
That means 3.5 GB is free. That's the reason it is giving you an alert. Now the new machines where we can see it. Okay. When under the host groups, you can see this is the new machine which you have added. Okay.
Right. Right.
Okay. When you click on this, you get the alerts. Right now, it will take some time to get updated. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So like this, you can have a number of machines. By where is it? Host groups. You can see the host. Okay. Clear? Like
Okay.
this, you can get the remote machines to monitor. So like this, tradition, not now. This was very frequently used when before the cloud era. Anuj. Okay. So now the cloud era, now all the clients are moving to cloud. So the cloud comes with a default monitoring tool, isn't it, Anuj? Like
CloudWatch.
Well, similar to
CloudWatch.
every Azure is also having their own monitoring service, and GCP is also, obviously every cloud will have their monitoring
But
service.
they might not be free. They might not be free, Sunil.
Yeah, they might not be free. So if that case, they can also use this one also along with that.
They can
Okay?
create a cloud instance and have this kind of
Have that.
save license cost.
You are right.
Sunil, one thing, if this monitoring tool, does it maintain some kind of logs?
Yeah, it maintains a lot of logs. Okay. And we need to also send email configurations and all this. Okay, I'm not sure where. I have never worked on this kind of on-premises monitoring
But
tools.
will it also have?
But it has all the features, exclusive features. We have all the features. Okay.
Will it be sending email notification?
Alerts? Yes, you're right. Okay. So this is just a quick small information which I want to share it for Nagios. So we know about now Nagios is a monitoring tools instead of completely depending on services of cloud providers. So you can also have our own monitoring tool. Okay. Next.
Okay, perfect. We can explore more on Nagios.
Yeah. Maheshwara.
Hi, Sunil. So Nagios, I think we have other tools called Splunk, Datadog. All these are similar things. Is that correct?
I think Splunk is not the monitoring tool.
It's a log actually.
Yeah. I'm not sure. Okay. Maheshwara. You worked on Splunk?
Splunk, yeah. Previously, I have configured Splunk for some other for
monitoring.
servers.
I think it is more.
Monitoring in the sense, for example, if the server logs are there, for example, you can if there are millions of rows are there actually for identifying the error logs, those kind of scenarios, we can write like a kind of GUI kind of thing which we can integrate with the server logs.
So that it will pull the logs and save it in one centralized location.
Yes. So easy identification of errors actually and those things.
But this is using the Splunk dashboard.
Yeah, it is also a monitoring tool actually,
okay. I think it is latest nowadays. I have seen Splunk. Many people are using Splunk.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nagios actually okay. So it is primarily
Nagios is not much right now used. Okay, Maheshwara.
Okay.
Now let's move on to next tool that is one of the most important tools that is called as Kubernetes. Okay.
Before we move, last question. So Nagios further configuration could be done from this graphics dashboard, or we have to.
Whenever further configurations is nothing but you're talking about if you want to add second server.
No, not second server. Modify some more parameters.
Yeah. All this can be done by using dashboard. You don't need to do it from the backend.
Perfect. Thank you, Sunil. Please move.
Nilakanda.
Hi, sir. That Nagios 3 represent of version name, sir?
Yes, Nagios version 3.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
See, 3.5.1. Okay?
Yeah, okay, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So let's move on to next tool called as Kubernetes. Okay. Anuj, if anybody asks you what is Kubernetes, what will be your answer?
I don't know. My answer would be
pretty
I don't know.
popular.
So that's why I'm not leaving any sessions, Sunil.
But
I'm,
what is Kubernetes?
it's Docker orchestration, I hope.
To be honest, I have no idea
Oh
myself.
God.
It's Docker orchestration, right?
Oh my God, there is no concept of Docker orchestration. It is container orchestration.
I'm so sorry, container. I was about to say container. By mistake, I said Docker, right?
If anybody asks you what is Kubernetes, simple, straightforward answer. Kubernetes is a container orchestration tool. Can you give me one example of container orchestration tool other than Kubernetes? Bhavat? Example of a container orchestration. One example of container orchestration is Kubernetes. Any other example of container orchestration? Yes, Vasant.
Docker Swarm.
Yes, you are right. Docker Swarm. We have learned it,
Docker
my dear
Swarm.
friends.
Oh,
I said when you're learning about Swarm, I said orchestration tool.
right,
Isn't
right.
it? What are the
that's right.
advantages? Anuj, what are the advantages of orchestration tool?
Orchestration makes it pretty load balancing is done very quickly, and it have one master and multiple slave nodes, and
Load
they
balancing.
can load balancing.
Advantages of orchestration tool is load balancing.
Load balancing, right?
And Vasant, what are the advantages? Only one advantage?
High availability, then
Huh? Performing
Scalability.
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 Oh my God.
Rolling upgrades.
Rolling updates.
Rolling updates.
Without any downtime, you can upgrade from lower version
Upgrades.
to next.
Right.
Handling failure scenarios.
Right.
If because of hardware failure, if one instance is down, automatically containers will move to other instance of the application
Other
is not
instance.
down. Okay.
Right.
Handling failure scenarios. All this we have learned practically, Anuj. All this we have learned:
Right,
load balancing,
right.
scalability, increasing the number of containers, decreasing the number of containers, rolling updates, handling failure scenarios.
Right.
All this we have learned with respect to Docker Swarm.
Right.
Now we are learning all this with respect to Kubernetes. Kubernetes is also comes under orchestration tool, container orchestration tool. So whatever the advantages we have experienced in Docker Swarm, the same advantages we are now experiencing in Kubernetes. Kubernetes is more widely used when compared to Swarm. Okay, Kubernetes is having is more powerful when compared to Swarm. So let's
So
get
Sunil,
into.
so Sunil, that means Docker and Kubernetes, they are kind of providing a similar kind of function. Maybe Kubernetes may be more functional. Is it?
Don't say Docker.
Oh, Docker Swarm.
Swarm.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
Yes, Docker is not an orchestration tool. Docker is a pure containerization tool. That's all.
Container. Okay, so that means Docker is a containerization tool. Docker Swarm is container orchestration tool.
Okay.
And similar to container orchestration, Docker Swarm, we have Kubernetes. But background, they both are orchestrating Docker.
You're right. You're right. I'm coming to that background. Okay. Background, every orchestration tool needs a containerization tool. In both the tools, as of now, both of the tools are using Docker as a container orchestration. Okay.
Right. Perfect.
Any questions, Rajagopalan?
No, sir, nothing, sir.
Okay. Yeah. So let's move on. So if anybody asks you what is Kubernetes, now you know the answer. Kubernetes is a container orchestration tool, and you also know the advantages of container orchestration: load balancing, scaling of containers without any downtime, rolling updates, and handling failure scenarios. So what are the advantages we have discussed in Docker Swarm? The same things what we will be experiencing in Kubernetes. Okay, so let's discuss more about Kubernetes.
Sunil, you really do a lot of hard work in preparing these materials. You prepare line by line. Perfect.
Thank you. Let's move on. Let's learn more about Kubernetes. This is what not I want. One minute, I am looking for some other material. Yeah, this is what I want. Who created Kubernetes? Google has created this orchestration tool, Kubernetes. So Google has created this tool, Kubernetes. It's an open source tool. Every orchestration tool depends on containerization tool. Every orchestration tool,
Right.
every orchestration tool depends on containerization tool. Docker Swarm depends on Docker. Similar to Docker Swarm, even Kubernetes needs a containerization tool. So the prerequisite is Docker, obviously. When without containerization tool, orchestration will not work.
Right.
Okay, so it is the prerequisite is Docker. People call Kubernetes as K8s, okay, because there are 8 letters between K and S. People call it as K8s. It is a container orchestration tool. Yes, we got it. What Kubernetes can do? Kubernetes can create cluster, can deploy cluster and manage cluster. So here we are coming across a new term called cluster.
That was not there
We
in
have
Swarm.
never used the term cluster in Docker
Swarm.
Swarm.
Right.
Whenever in the interview they are referring as cluster, that means you have next second you have to understand that he is expecting something from Kubernetes. Otherwise, they will not use a term called cluster. So you in Kubernetes, what we'll do, we'll create a cluster and we'll manage clusters. Okay. What is cluster? We'll see it soon. By using Kubernetes, what we do, we can form a cluster. We'll see practically how to form a cluster. Kubernetes schedules, runs, manage isolated containers. Finally, it manages the containers. Every orchestration tool manages the containers. Convert isolated containers running on a different hardware into a cluster. We'll see this practically. Don't worry. If you want to practice Kubernetes on AWS, we have a service called as EKS. You can practice Kubernetes on AWS. If you want to practice Kubernetes on AWS, we have an exclusive service called as Elastic Kubernetes Service, using which you can practice Kubernetes on AWS. The features of Kubernetes, in other words, the advantages of Kubernetes is orchestration, auto scaling, auto healing, load balancing, rollback. The same thing which we have discussed here in the previous example, orchestration. Clustering any number of containers on a different hardware. This is called as, it's nothing but running infrastructure on distributed environment.
Right.
They have given a terminology called orchestration. Docker Swarm, running containers on distributed environment is orchestration. The same thing what we have done is orchestration. Okay. Auto scaling. So we have scaling. We have in Docker Swarm we have learned about scaling, right? Auto scaling. The same thing is called as auto scaling. Auto healing. Auto healing is something like handling failure scenarios in Docker Swarm. Here we name it as auto healing. When new containers will be created on place of crashed containers. Remember, whenever we stop a particular container, automatically new containers gets created. At any point of time, the desired state, the actual state
matches the desired
so that's
state.
called as auto healing feature.
Right.
Load balancing, as we already know it, the load gets distributed into multiple hardwares. Okay, and rolling back, you can go to previous version. So whatever the same advantages we have experienced in Swarm, we'll also experience it in Kubernetes. Okay.
So explicit to that Docker Swarm, we have new feature called cluster. That is the only difference.
Cluster is not
Majorly.
a feature. Cluster is not a feature. Cluster is before going ahead to explain about the cluster, the next
I got it.
I
understand.
the next image what I'm showing you is an image of cluster. Before showing you an image of a cluster in Docker Swarm, Anuj, what we had in Docker Swarm, we have manager mission. Agree?
Right.
Manager mission, worker 1, worker 2, worker 3, worker 3. Okay. In all the 4 missions, we installed Docker. That is first.
Docker, right.
And only in one mission we have installed extra component that is called as Swarm.
Swarm.
The mission in which Swarm is installed, it's called as a manager mission.
Manager mission.
Manager mission. The moment you install Swarm, it generates a token command. That token command we have copied. And we have executed the token command in server worker 1, worker 2, worker 3. The moment you run the command, what you got a response saying that this node has added to manager, this node has added to the manager, this node has a manager. This combination of manager and worker missions in Kubernetes, they call it as cluster.
Okay.
In Swarm, there's no terminology. In Kubernetes, they name it as cluster. Cluster is nothing but combination of manager mission and worker missions when you want to compare with the Swarm. So cluster is not a feature. It's the terminology where they have given for the infrastructure.
Thank you, Sunil. I was comparing this with a normal cluster in which same instances are running on one node. And
so Kubernetes architecture, you can see now. I want to show you an example of a cluster. Let's copy here.
So we have same features, right? No difference.
That's why they both are under the same category orchestration.
Okay. I was comparing this cluster with our traditional clusters.
No. This is a Kubernetes architecture. Okay. This is a Kubernetes architecture. So let's try to understand it is what. Let's understand each and every component. A cluster is a combination of one master and multiple nodes, isn't it?
Right.
In Kubernetes, my notes. In Kubernetes, in Docker Swarm, we name it as manager. The same thing in Kubernetes, we call it as master. We'll not name it as manager, we'll call it as master. That's it. In Kubernetes, we have to use a term called master. In Swarm, we have to use it as manager. Both are the same.
Correct.
So if you can see this particular diagram, this first component is master. Can you see? This first component is Kubernetes master. The second component is node. The second component is called as node. If you compare its form, the first component is something like manager mission, and here worker 1, worker 2. Here instead of workers, we call it as node. So this is a cluster. A cluster is nothing but a combination of master machine and node machine. This is an example of cluster with how many masters?
One master.
And how many nodes? How many nodes? This is one node.
One node.
One node. This is an example of a cluster with one master and one node. A cluster can be one master with 2 nodes. Cluster can be one master with 3 nodes. Cluster can be one master with 5 nodes. It's up to us the requirement. How many hardwares you want? You want those many number of hardwares. Got it?
Right.
Okay. So cluster is nothing but combination of master machine and node machines. A cluster can be one master, one node. A cluster can be one master and number of nodes. Clear about the term called cluster?
Correct. So Sunil, it also balance the load of any application, right?
Yes.
Whatever the.
You're right.
Okay. So I was comparing with traditional cluster.
No, that's not.
But there is no use of traditional cluster if this things comes in picture. It is handling the similar situation over here as well, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Got it.
Cluster is combination of one master and multiple nodes.
Multiple
It
nodes.
can be one node, two node, and number of. That's why this statement is very, very important. Hey, this is an example of a cluster. What I have shown is an example of a cluster with one master and one node. Okay.
Correct.
Any questions? Theory is also very, very important. This is you can have to project it. Yes, Balaji.
Yeah, hi, Shri.
Yes, Balaji.
You said that Docker Swarm and Kubernetes are same.
Yes. So
Is
it's
there
both
any
are orchestration tools.
Yeah, any drawback from the Docker Swarm so that we can come to Kubernetes?
Yes, the Kubernetes is having one advantage with respect to Docker Swarm. Okay. The advantage is Balaji.
Yeah, yeah. Sir.
In Docker Swarm, every orchestration tool should depend on containerization tool. Agree?
Yeah.
Every
Okay.
orchestration tool should depend on containerization. Isn't it, Balaji? Docker Swarm will depend on which tool?
Docker.
Hmm?
Docker.
Docker.
Docker Swarm is binded to Docker, no doubt.
Docker.
Okay. Kubernetes is also orchestration tool. Kubernetes uses which containerization tool?
Docker.
Balaji. As of now, it is Docker.
Okay.
Because 95% of the orchestration market is captured by Docker.
Docker.
In future, if one more containerization tool comes, some XYZ containerization tool comes, that containerization tool can also use Kubernetes. Kubernetes is not strongly binded to Docker.
Okay.
Okay. Docker Swarm is having no option. It should go with Docker only. Whereas Kubernetes, as of now, it is going with Docker. It's not mandatory that it go with Docker. In future, if some other containerization tool comes, it is having more advantage than Docker. Then Kubernetes can be used as other or containerization tool for orchestration features. Got it? It's not strongly binded to Docker.
Yeah.
Okay. It can use some other containerization tools. Clear, Balaji?
Yeah. Got it.
This is the main important advantage of Kubernetes when compared to Docker Swarm. Next, very important. Till now, we have never used a term called pod. Till now, in our training, I have never used a term called pod. In this, now I am using a term called pod. Okay. Pod is an atomic unit. Atomic unit is nothing but the smallest unit of deployment in Kubernetes. What does that mean? You have to understand this statement. Balaji,
yes,
tell me whether this statement is correct or not. Kubernetes can create container. True or false?
False.
You are right. Kubernetes cannot create container because it's not a containerization tool.
Yeah.
So which can create container? Docker can create.
Docker
can create container. Fine, very good. If it cannot create container, what it can create? It can create pod. Okay. What Kubernetes can create? It can create many objects, but the smallest object I'm talking about, the tiniest object. To learn Kubernetes, the first thing we start is pod. So whenever it creates a pod, what Kubernetes can create? What Kubernetes can create is Kubernetes can create a pod. So that's why it is smallest unit, atomic unit. Kubernetes can create more than pod. There are many other objects what Kubernetes create, but I don't want to confuse you. The smallest object what Kubernetes can create is pod. Okay,
like minimum thing it can create pod.
Minimum thing what it can create is
pod.
Pod can be created using Kubernetes. Agree, Balaji?
Yes.
Finally, what does pod contains? You don't need to doubt on it. Always pod contains container.
Yes.
Always. And this container can be created using containerization tool. So for our case, in our context, it is
Docker.
So if you want to, in Kubernetes platform, if you want to create a container, definitely that container will be inside the pod. You will never experience a container without a pod, Balaji.
Yeah.
You will never experience a container without a pod. In Kubernetes, every container will be definitely inside a pod, guaranteed. Got it?
Yes.
Perfect.
So Sunil, it means we have multiple containers inside a pod, just like we can define in Docker Swarm, maybe 4 or
You can say
5. It will
pod
expand
can
and
consist of one or more Docker containers. Okay, one or more Docker containers. For simplicity purpose, visualize as one. Pod equal to container. Generally, for simplicity purpose, look at this equation. Pod equal to container. Generally, there will be one pod. Inside one pod, there will be one container. But technically, one pod can have multiple containers. Clear, Anuj?
right.
Pod runs in node. What is node? In the orchestration,
Employee.
we have Balaji. We have discussed about architecture. We have created. This is a cluster.
Yeah. Absolutely.
With Kubernetes master and Kubernetes node. So when we are creating pod, you have to understand that pod will always run it on
Node.
Pod always runs on node. Pod never will run it on master machine. It always runs on node. That means master will not take the load in Kubernetes, Balaji.
Yeah.
In Kubernetes, master will not take the load. Load is
Only.
always taken by nodes only. Unlike Swarm, in Swarm, even have you remember, manager is also taking the load. Few
Yeah.
containers
Right.
are running on the manager.
Correct.
Unlike Swarm, here the architecture is different. Master will never take the load. That means in master machine, you will never find containers. You will never find pods. You will never find containers. Pods will be always running inside the node machine only.
And nodes are the physical hardware, physical
Yes,
different.
you are right.
Physical.
You are right.
Master makes node to work.
Master makes nodes work. So master gives the instructions to the node. Okay, so Balaji, same statement. Node is controlled by
Kubernetes master.
Kubernetes master. Is it?
Yeah.
Every statement is important, Balaji. Every statement is important. These kind of statements will make us more matured when we start into practicals. Next point. Kubernetes does not understand containers. Agree?
Yes.
Never it can understand because not a containerization tool, boss. It can never understand container. So what it can understand? It can understand pods. That's it.
So pod is in a kind of envelope or a box in which
Yes.
there are, it may be
Correct.
one container,
Exactly.
it may be multiple containers.
Containers, yes. So it's an abstract layer over the container. Pod is a layer over the container.
And pod
Technically,
is
what
only,
we need is a container, but in Kubernetes, there is a layer over the container that's called pod.
right. So that means Kubernetes deals
Actually,
with pod.
technically, this pod is abstracting the containerization to Docker. Okay.
Got it.
So technically, that's the reason behind.
So
this.
Kubernetes only understands pod,
Pod.
and pod manage containers.
Yes,
So
by taking help of, with the help of Docker.
Docker. So that means it is in the Kubernetes is indirectly managing containers
Using Docker.
using Docker, right?
In this diagram, we have seen one master and one node. A node is also called as minion. You can see here, I clearly mentioned, node is also called as minion. Master is also called as control plane. Master is also called as control plane. If anybody is referring to control plane, you have to understand that it's nothing but a master. Control plane. Okay. So we had some understanding. We had some understanding about Kubernetes. Yes, Jayashree.
Sir,
Yes.
sir, POD, any abbreviation is there?
No abbreviation. Okay, pod in actually there's a dictionary meaning. There's an English meaning with the pod. Pod is something like a location where we can do some work or something like that. We can say in English also there's a meaning for the pod. It's not a new word. It has a dictionary meaning also.
So Sunil, one question that was even creating a doubt before.
One.
This particular master goes down, what would happen?
I'll answer you. Okay. We have not started practicals, right?
Okay.
So there's a meaning for the term pods. Okay, so this is something like a pod. Inside the pod, these are all the containers you can visualize. Okay.
Perfect.
So pod is something like a location where we can sit. In the furniture also, there's a meaning of the term pod furniture, where we can sit and reside and we can do some works. These are called as pods. Okay.
Even that circle in which in Diwali Mela data are also pods in which we sit and
you can visualize pod is some activities is going on. That's called as a pod. Okay. So definitely pod will have something physically also. We have seen the images. So here technically pod will have containers. Yes, Babat.
So I have a quick question regarding open source. So I've come across that terminology, and I still don't understand it based on the fact that like my background is not really IT.
Open source is, if you want to use a particular tool, you don't need to buy license. It is free, in other words. Okay. Linux is an open source operating system, so Linux is free. Okay. But MySQL is open source database. That means if you want to use MySQL for your business purpose also, you can use it for free. But MySQL is an open source database where Oracle SQL Server, these are all licensed. If you want to use Oracle or if you want to use SQL Server, you need to buy license. Okay. From Microsoft, if you want to use SQL Server. Okay. If you want to use Oracle, you have to buy license. If you want to use MySQL for your business, you don't need to use, you don't need to buy license. Any product which does not need any license is open source. Okay.
Got it. Thank you.
And you can customize it according to your requirement also. Okay.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. The next thing what we have to discuss is about, we had understanding about architecture of Kubernetes. The next thing what we have to discuss is about each and every component of Kubernetes: kube scheduler, controller manager, etcd. What is kubelet? What is kube proxy? What is container engine? What is API server? So we have to understand each and every component of Kubernetes architecture before getting into the practicals. That we will discuss it in a tomorrow session. So tomorrow we'll discuss about individual components of Kubernetes architecture, and then we will be jumping into the practicals of Kubernetes in tomorrow session. Okay, Balaji.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for the section.
Thank you. Any questions? Babat, anything more?
No, that's it for now.
Okay,
I
please.
just have to, like I did this internship with IBM, and then during the internship we did a project, and the project is about new IBM strategy because they purchased Red Hat, and they have this new strategy which is called IBM Hybrid Cloud Platform.
Okay.
And as an accounting student, I just didn't know anything about all these new terminologies. It was just my first encounter with it. And I just have to tell you, this class, your training, really changed my perspective about a lot of things. Now, even when I go in, I'll feel more confidence to engage.
Thank you, Babat. Thank you. Even it increases my confidence with your feedbacks. Okay. Thank you. Thank you all. I hope you had a good time today. Tomorrow we will be jumping into the practicals of Kubernetes. Okay. Until then, spend some time exploring about Kubernetes before joining tomorrow. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.